tuning into BaisWave.
Welcome to the newest episode of Everything IS, where we talk about everything there is to know about studying international studies at Leiden University. I am Annika, a second-year IS student, and I will be your host today. So today we will go more in depth about what it would entail to study Southeast Asia and Eurasia in IS. So we have here our first guest. What's your name?
My name is Léna.
And what region do you study?
Now I'm currently studying Southeast Asia.
And what language are you doing with Southeast
Indonesian.
Asia? What do you like about studying your region?
I really like that it's very colorful in terms of we have a couple of countries to look at, and they are very, very different. And for me as well, it's a whole new area that we're not focusing enough in high school. Just to mention one term, because we like terms in international studies, which is Eurocentrism, which I really feel, because as a Hungarian, we don't really study about this region, and it's so good to actually discover countries that we never really talk about.
Which countries are all in Southeast Asia?
So if you look at the world map, it's basically Afghanistan is on the border, but we mostly focus on from Pakistan to the Philippines on the other side, and then Indonesia, Brunei, Bhutan, India, and these kind of these countries are included. So it's a big variety, and we mostly divide them in classes to South Asia, which is until like Bangladesh, and then Southeast Asia with the rest.
Do you have like a favorite class in your region?
That's a good question, because I'm really interested in all of the subjects that we have, because it's a broad thing to discover. But I'm really interested in politics and also the language, of course. It's very exciting.
Yeah. And then with politics, because Southeast Asia has a lot of countries, a lot of cultures, how do you like narrow it down with politics? Are you going into the specific of each country? Is it trends in that region?
I mean, it really depends on the lesson. But for example, we focused on civil and military relations, and then we focused on country cases, for example, Pakistan or Bangladesh or Thailand, for example, and also Indonesia had some history on that. And then we also look at some civil society. So we have like these themes, and then we also focus on country cases within the topic.
What advantage do you feel like would studying this region give you, like either in the job market or in the master or just in life in general?
So I think maybe that not a lot of people are actually like interested in that region, and not a lot of people go in depth, like with economics, politics, and also the language. I think gives a big advantage, because if we know like an exotic language, or like considered exotic in Europe, then that also gives a big advantage for someone who is looking especially for someone who actually knows the language and still is located in the continent, maybe.
Yeah, definitely. And you're doing Indonesian, right?
Yes.
For your language. Can you tell me a little bit about that? How is learning Indonesian? Because I'm presuming you didn't have any Indonesian in high school.
No, for sure not. But I'm one of the few students in our class, we're not many of course, but who doesn't have a root in Indonesian, like in Indonesia, because we have a couple of people who actually have family or have been raised a bit culturally but don't know actually the language, but still have some kind of idea how the language is structured and some words maybe, but I didn't have. And then I also speak some other languages as well, which are mostly European, so that also is but also a challenge for me to understand the structure of it and how they form the words, the sentences. So it's really interesting to see how Indonesian actually think through their language, because it's very different. Also a cultural interaction in that way. So the teacher actually talks about the culture and the country as well, and how it actually goes there.
And then in Southeast Asia, you can also choose Hindi, right? So
yes.
It's Hindi or Indonesian, or am I forgetting?
No, it's correct, yeah.
Do you know maybe from your classmates what they think about studying Hindi?
I know that they really like the teacher. He's really fun. And they take maybe a different perspective on learning language, they also look at music as well, which I sometimes
fun.
miss, but we still look at it, but they go more in depth with, I don't know, listening to music or to a video, and then they learn the script maybe. They also do a lot of script exercises because of course it's a different script. But I think the one, like, I am talking with them like maybe daily, and they're very interested in it and then excited to go to the class because it's also a very fascinating language to learn.
History of Southeast Asia, do you start from zero, like all the way to the olden age, or do you start like somewhere in the 1900s, or where do you start?
If I remember correctly, I don't want to say any stupid things, but I think it was from like the 17th century, so to have like a background knowledge as well, but then we also focus on colonialism and how it has affected, and then also we go until present day and how it's now.
Why do you believe students should choose Southeast Asia?
I think it really gives another perspective. I think I've mentioned it before, because, for example, Asian values to me were quite unknown, I guess, and also a bit of maybe the opposites of what values I have, maybe. And then also, for example, one of my classmates is looking at Bhutan in one of their essays, and they have an alternative GDP measurement, which is like gross national happiness,
Aww.
which is also another kind of perspective on the world and how they actually measure their, I don't know, GDP in that way, which is, I think it's fascinating. And also they have so many cultures, and also it's very interesting to see what colonialism has brought. Of course, this is a very cliche answer to mention colonialism, but it's very interesting, and how they have dealt with it, and also the independence movements. Exactly, it's very broad and colorful.
Nice. So it gives you like a real new perspective of looking at the world than maybe the Western perspective.
Yes.
We talked about it a little bit, but Southeast Asia is often overlooked, not just in school, but also in global media. You don't hear as much about the countries in Southeast Asia. How do you feel like that affects your experience of learning in depth for the first time, basically, about this region?
Yeah, I didn't have any expectation in the beginning, because I of course, through media, I haven't seen many news about it. Of course, with actually choosing the region, I got to learn about like current news that is happening, for example, in Bangladesh or in Nepal, which are very fascinating. But it affects me in the way that I have to dig a bit deeper than I expected, because of course, if I have to choose an essay topic, of course some people have background knowledge, and then they have the source, like the news outlets, to look directly, and they know where to search for it. But for me, I think it takes a bit more time to explore what kind of topics are there. So maybe that's the only thing that affects me.
But that's also really interesting, though. Then you can be at a family dinner and be like, guess what I learned?
Exactly, yeah.
One last question. If you would recommend one movie to watch about Southeast Asia, what would it be?
Ooh, that's a very hard question. Thank you. But nowadays, I don't really watch movies because I don't have the time. But I have some movies on my list to watch. So on Netflix, I recommend looking at, I think if you can type Indonesian or search by language, I think I definitely recommend to exercise through movies, because it's still a leisure thing to do, but at the same time you exercise it. But I don't have one now.
No, but I like that. Just like go and watch, for every listener, go and watch like an Indian movie or an Indonesian movie, because it gives you some perspective, a little bit about their culture maybe, and
also the language and how they use it in the movie. And maybe it gives a bit more idea about how they use it in the everyday life, or just maybe slangs as well. So yeah, I agree with you.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. I thought it was very interesting to talk to you.
Thank you very much for the opportunity, and I really recommend this region because it's very exciting and and broad and colorful and diverse, of course.
So next year we want to see more students enroll in this region, right?
Exactly. And
Yeah.
it's, of course, economically coming up, and we'll see what's going to happen in the future as well.
What's your name?
Hi, I'm Margaux.
What region do you study?
I'm studying Eurasia.
It's the least chosen region, am I right?
Yeah, I think it is.
How big is your class now?
Right now, we're 14, 15 people, maybe.
What would you say to students who have already disregarded Russia and Eurasia to choose?
Firstly, honestly, I could understand because there are a lot of stereotypes on the region which are circulating, so it could be understandable. But honestly, you should reconsider it because it's a really interesting region. It has a lot of history, a really long history. It's a big country, so the culture goes from, I don't like using these words, but from west to east, and also from north to south, because we're studying like Russia and Kazakhstan and Turkmenistan. It's a really broad region. So it's still a really interesting choice. As I said, it has a long history. So we have a lot of sources, a lot of people who are really interested and who are studying the region. We have good teachers. It's a really important country.
It would give an advantage in the job market, you would say, right? Because I think...
Especially, I was told by my Russian teacher that especially if you want to work in the European Union, speaking Russian and knowing about Russia is really important because Russia is next to Europe and there are a lot of tensions right now. So it's a really touchy subject. So the more you know about it, the more specialized you are, the more it's a good advantage for the job market, yeah.
What would you say the biggest misconception in IS is about studying Russia?
So I went to the last area fair, and what I've heard from certain students was, so you support Russia in the invasion, the full-scale invasion of Ukraine, and the teachers were, of course not. Of course not. We are not supporting anything. We're only studying it. So I think that's the main misconception about it. The fact that students and teachers are pro-Russian.
And it's also like understanding maybe why it's happening is also not the same as justifying
Exactly.
they're doing. And I think that's good to remember for students.
Yeah, especially when you arrive in IS first year, you can listen to certain teachers who say certain things and you're like, oh my God, he's justifying something. And not at all, he's just explaining it and explaining the different points of view. So that's a really interesting thing that we learn also in IS, specifically in Russia and Eurasia, yeah.
Do you focus mostly on Russia or do you also focus on the other countries in Eurasia?
So last semester, I'm going to do semester by semester. Last semester, we studied history and culture. So for history, we did mostly Russia. We did from the 1910s, maybe 1890s to today. So the whole history, like a bit of Tsarist powers, Soviet Union, and a bit of modern history. So it was mainly focused on Russia. Culture, we did half of the semester was about Russia, and the other half was about more broadly the gender norms, the food, we did also Kazakh poetry, which was really specific, but it was really interesting. I really liked it. Then this semester we're doing economics and politics. Both are kind of following the same pattern. We're doing first block, so the first 6 lectures about Russia, and the next 6 lectures we're going to do on more like Kazakhstan, Turkmenistan, Georgia, other countries, Ukraine.
What would you say is your favorite subjects, area-related subjects?
So I have certain love for economics. I always liked it. And our teacher is a really interesting person. He's really passionate and he really knows his topic. So I think econ is my favorite topic of Russia and Eurasia region.
What should students know before going to study your region?
Okay, that might not be really encouraging, but Russian is really hard. So be prepared. So yeah, the language, you have to study a lot. You have to put actual effort in it. And honestly, other than that, you can not know anything about the region and you're still gonna do great. Like the teachers really take you from a point where you don't know anything. They're really here to encourage you and help you.
When you study Russia, what are like the challenge is when it comes to accessing maybe reliable information, and how do the professors deal with that? How do the professors make sure you get reliable sources?
So there's, of course, a challenge in accessing sources about Russia and Eurasia. One tip that our teachers gave us is to actually make a list where you put your websites and every journal that you know is reliable. So, for example, the first that comes into mind is Medusa. It's a journal. It's a Russian journal, but from people who left Russia because they were declared secret agents. Foreign agents, sorry. So Medusa is a really good journal in Russian, so it's really interesting to take a few sources from this. But honestly, the teachers, they also have really good sources, and you can always go ask them if you need any help. And you can find sources, even if it seems intimidating.
Why do you believe more students should sign up for Russia and Eurasia?
So, as I already said, it's a big advantage on the job market as it's a kind of understudied region. So you can add your knowledge and it gives you some kind of advantage because, yeah, we're not a lot of people specialized in it.
As someone who doesn't know that much about Russia, like, what are some things you learned in Russian culture classes? I'm very curious to know.
So culture, we learned a lot about a modern culture, first of all. So how are people living in Russia? Because we cannot travel there right now. So it's kind of closed off and we don't know that much. It seems really like mysterious. So we learned about like the cities, the urban like areas, something like that. We learned about food, which was really interesting. And it looks good. We learned about gender norms, how gender is affecting life in Russia. We also learned about poetry. I already mentioned that. We did a class, like an hour about poetry. The war poetry too. So both during like Second World War and actual invasion of Ukraine.
Russia is obviously a very, very big country. I think it's the biggest country in the world. So obviously there's probably a lot of varieties in Russia itself in cultures.
So yeah, there is a lot of variety in culture because of course it's, as you said, a really big country. So first thing that comes into my mind is we watched a movie about the region Yakutia that also is named Sakha. I'm not sure about the pronunciation. So it was a movie about how people lived in small communities, which is really different from, for example, life in Moscow or St. Petersburg, which are the two main cities. So yeah, there is a lot of variety in the country.
If you could describe your region in one movie, which would it be?
I think I would say you cannot describe the region in one movie, or at least I don't have the right movie. But a good movie that talks about the region could be The Death of Stalin that we watched last semester. Hans Wilbrink, our teacher, organized a movie night and we watched the movie. It was a really good movie. It's really funny. So yeah, the movie The Death of Stalin, it talks about how at the moment of the death of Stalin, the people under him, so like friends or the people who worked with him, wanted to take the power. And so it's a really interesting movie about like relationships of power and how people are lying to each other, but at the same time they cannot, because in the Soviet Union you couldn't really lie, because if you got caught, then, well, yeah, something not nice would happen.
All right, well, that's a little bit of homework for our listeners. Go watch that movie, guys. And also, I would say don't immediately disregard Russia and Eurasia. Go do some research on it, and I really hope next year there will be more students in Russia and Eurasia.
Yeah, I hope to see you there.
All right, thank you so much.
Thank you.